Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
Good morning and welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. Thank you again for welcoming us into your homes and your hearts. I'm with your host, Lee Martin, and a guest that we've had on our show before, Ms. Marilyn Baldwin from the Sunshine State of Florida. And Ms. Baldwin, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about on this show today. Our last show, we talked about, we talked about you, where you're coming from, where you've been. Let's start again, just kind of refresh our guests with what city are you located?
I am located in Orlando, Florida, home of Disney World, and I bring you greetings from the Central Florida chapter, National Federation of the Blind, and the National Federation of the Blind of Florida.
Ms. Baldwin, we want to thank you once again for joining us on the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. We had a lot of good conversation when we last spoke, and I tell you, it is so exciting to share with such a historian, someone that has been an innovator and has done so much in her life and time. It's just, to me, I'm honored and humbled to have you once again with us. Being the first blind African-American woman to graduate from Bethune-Cookman University that we covered on our last show really meant a lot to me. And I know it meant a lot to you. And how do you feel about that when you reflect in today's life for yourself?
It was a wonderful experience. When I go back and think about the fact that Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune had a dream that she started with young girls and limited funds, and to be able to walk on that same campus, many years afterwards, and to have the opportunity to study with very professional instructors and other students, and to teach them about blindness, and to come from the humble beginnings of a family that started out in rural Georgia. My parents were my father was a farmer, my mom was a nurse, and then to come to Florida and go to the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind in St. Augustine and graduate, and then to go to a historic Black college. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm very glad that I had it. And to some degree, from time to time, we'll run into individuals that I was classmates with at the school, and it was just a life-changing event. And I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to not only prepare to be an educator, an advocate, but to learn that Black history firsthand.
Now, Marilyn, for the guests who did not have the opportunity to see the first show, what was your medical diagnosis for your eye condition?
I was born with congenital cataracts and nystagmatism. And at 9 months old, I had surgery that removed the cataracts and on both eyes. And it did give me a little more vision, but still left me legally blind. And today, along with the congenital cataracts, I have ocular hypertension and the early beginnings of macular degeneration.
So Marilyn, you, as we recap, you also, did you attend the School for the Blind in Florida?
The Florida School for the Deaf and Blind is located in St. Augustine, Florida. I attended the school from 8th through 12th grade. And many of the students that I attended the school with went to school there all, from kindergarten through 12th grade. But I went to public school in the beginning. But halfway through public school, after 7th grade, they made a change, and we were only going to have an itinerant teacher 1 or 2 hours a week. And I knew that that really wasn't going to be enough for me. So I was very glad to have the experience of going to the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind, because it not only taught the skills of blindness, but it also gave the socialization that would have been missed on the many hours of a bus ride to and from school in the public school setting.
Okay, Marilyn, now you mentioned that you were an educator. Was that your, would you consider that to be your occupational dream, and when did you decide that you wanted to be an educator?
I always wanted to teach children. I always wanted to help others. So yes, being an educator was my dream job. And for 4.5 years, I taught at a private school for children with learning disabilities. And this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it was really hard to find a teaching position in our local public schools or any public schools, around. This was the time of the early 80s. So after the 4.5 years of teaching at the school and not being able to find another teaching position, I went to work in an administrative position at the city of Orlando. And that allowed me to better advocate for persons who were blind and vision impaired. That's how I came to know the National Federation of the Blind and to serve as a commissioner on the Florida Commission for the Disadvantaged from 1996 to 2002. And that was a wonderful experience because I was able to travel throughout the state of Florida promoting the transportation disadvantaged program and really promoting blindness and independence.
Well, there's so much to share. And, as we recapped, and we will be looking forward to our next segment here, where we'll be talking about the life and some of the challenges and the journey of Miss Marilyn Baldwin. And we just want everyone to stay tuned, and we'll be right back to talk with Miss Marilyn Baldwin regarding overcoming some personal life experiences other than just blindness. So stay tuned.
I am a blind vendor, and one of the things that I truly miss is reading Vending Times magazine.
Hoosiers can hear Indiana magazines, circulars, national magazines, and information from across the globe. Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
It is a fantastic service.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. And Marilyn, are you still an educator, or have you since changed your occupation?
I have changed my occupation and am retired. After 4 years of teaching at the private school in Maitland, which is a little community outside of Orlando, I went to work for the Planning and Development Department of the City of Orlando as an administrative assistant, and now I am retired from the City of Orlando on long-term disability.
Well, oftentimes, Marilyn, when people retire, they face a myriad of challenges. Could you talk with us a little bit about some of the challenges that you may have faced since retirement as a blind citizen, please?
When we work full or part-time, a lot of our socialization is built around the people that we work with and work for. So even in blindness, after you leave work, if you don't have a plan, sometimes even if you do have a plan, you don't know what to do with yourself. You still, as an adult with an active mind and body, there's still some things you want to be involved in. Thankfully, I still was able to work in our Central Florida chapter, National Federation of the Blind, and the Transportation Disadvantaged Commission. I was still able to serve on that. But I just encourage individuals that are thinking about retirement or going into retirement as a person who's blind, connect with your local chapter, connect with other community organizations that don't have anything to do with blindness, or you're going to go through a very difficult period of trying to find, where is my place? What do I do?
Okay, now Marilyn, now I know that none of us ever prepare for health issues. And what has happened in your life? How did you handle it? And where are you now?
In 1996, while working for the city of Orlando, I noticed that I was very tired all of the time. I was born with a congenital heart murmur, and I lived very well with it up until 1996. So just out of an abundance of caution, we visited my local cardiologist, and that is when I was told that my aortic valve was failing and had to be replaced. This was going to be a big, major change because it also would involve a lifetime commitment to taking Coumadin, which is a blood thinning medication. And they were very concerned about how a blind person would be able to handle living with Coumadin. So I was faced with having to leave work for 8 weeks, having a major open heart surgery, and learning to live with taking new medications. I found that working full-time was a little bit more than I could do after surgery. So I went to working part-time, and it was hard. It was scary to think about having open heart surgery. It was frightening to think about, all right, here is another life condition that we learn to live with along with blindness. Would I still have my independence? And what would life be like? But, thank God, everything turned out well. I just celebrated 25 years of having had my open heart surgery. The downside to this is after 25 years, the valve begins to wear down. And so we are looking at having to replace the valve again.
You mentioned something there, Marilyn, that kind of interested me in that particular journey of yours with the heart. You mentioned medications and being blind. Have you had difficulties, or have you found medical devices that are out there that to assist you in identifying your medication, or in your area of independence? Do you have someone to assist you with your medicines, or how do you do that as a blind citizen?
Since I have some usable vision, Lee, I ask the pharmacist to please type the label in very large letters, large print, so that I can read it. I put the medications in a certain order on my dresser so that I know where they are. And there are some situations where I do need assistance. If we're talking about Sometimes I have to take the blood thinning medication in an injectable form. I do have assistance from family with that. And once in a while, I make the mistake that probably may be attributed to blindness, and it may be attributed to a senior moment where I will wonder if I've taken a medication or not. And that can be scary. That's where those assistive devices, like the systems that can read the pharmacy labels to you, are so important to people living with blindness and low vision.
Well, I tell you, during, as an advocate with the National Federation of the Blind, you know that is one of our initiatives with Congress right now to make sure that we do have access to digital medical devices, and so that we can, you know, still take care of ourselves and take care of our families independently. But that's just a conversation that we'll have in our next segment, because we're at the time now where we need to take a commercial pause. And hey, we'll be right back to talk a little bit more about independence and not being independent. So we'll be right back.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I am a CFP practitioner, and I happen to be blind. I rely on NFB Newsline to keep me current with Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times.
Hoosiers can hear Indiana magazines, circulars, national magazines, and information from across the globe. Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Welcome back. We're having a heart-to-heart conversation with Marilyn Baldwin. And on this segment, we're talking about independence. And when is it appropriate to be independent? Marilyn, with your heart transplant, I know that it was quite a transition for you. Being in the hospital, depending on doctors, depending on families, depending on people to make sure that your medication was correct at a time that you could not. What is your stance, Marilyn, on being independent?
I am a firm believer of being independent when it is appropriate. When you're in a health setting with possibly a life-changing event or a serious medical issue, it's always appropriate to accept and ask for help. Otherwise, you may endanger your life and make it more difficult for those who are caring for you, nurses, doctors, medical technicians, family members, to give you the appropriate care. For instance, in my case, I was initially very afraid of getting up and walking around. So it was very important to me to say each morning and each afternoon, could one of the nurses or aides please assist me with doing my walks around the hall? Otherwise, I would have been in bed and possibly had a blood clot. So it's very important for you to ask for assistance when you need it. The other thing that I'm very comfortable with is alerting the medical staff that I am blind. Many of the hospital rooms have a whiteboard, and it's all right. And for me, that they put on that whiteboard that I am blind, because that's the first place that the medical staff will look for assistance and for notations.
And do you find, Marilyn, that we have to continue as advocates and as we live our lives of independence, that we have a responsibility to help educate people and particular professionals, and we're talking about medical staff and things. A lot of times they haven't been introduced to people with blindness, and they really don't know the proper etiquettes and how to, travel with us. And even during our times of health issues, as you were in the hospital, we can take those short conversations and steps with those individuals to teach them the proper etiquettes on how to walk with us as blind citizens. Do you do that?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing I say, because I still have many medical appointments because of my health challenges, I will often say to them, please ask a blind person or a person with a disability, how may I assist you? And then showing them sighted guide. Some of the doctors will often ask, well, who takes care of you? And immediately you go into, no, I'm living my life as an independent blind person. I have family and friends around just as you do, but there's nobody, quote unquote, taking care of me. I've learned through training to live my life independently.
I know that, being in the hospital setting, a lot of times blind individuals are, they're put in a state of what they call fall risk. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that to me is very important, that people understand that just because people are blind doesn't make us a fall risk. We don't need the bells and whistles on our beds just because we're blind. We're able to feed ourselves. And if we need help, we will ask. And I think that is so important that the medical people in the medical field understand that. What would you say, Marilyn?
That is so true. I don't want to be taken over. I want to be assisted as needed. And if I don't need bells and whistles on my bed at home, I'm traveling independently, not a great fall risk, then why should I need them in the hospital setting? And these are discussions I think you have with that physician, that surgeon, that medical staff before you enter the hospital. What are their expectations for your recovery as a person who is blind? That, like you say, there are a lot of things that they want to do to us that are simply not acceptable. And having that conversation beforehand can help you when you're not as able to articulate under medical care always.
Well, and another conversation that is so important is that we have the conversation with our family and friends about power of attorneys, medical representation, things like that we ought to put in place before health issues may come up. Before
I had my open heart surgery, all of those documents were done. That was so important to me. Even now, as we're living with COVID, I urge people, please designate a medical surrogate. You decide in writing what type of treatment you would want if you have to be hospitalized for COVID or any type of other medical emergency, because if something does go wrong, you're not going to be able to communicate for yourself, and you need to designate who you want to do that, and you state what procedures you do or do not want done on your behalf. And then you're not leaving someone who may not really know and who's struggling with what kind of care does Lee, Florence, or Marilyn want. We've planned that ahead of time.
And planning is really strategic plans that we have to place, and we have to make sure, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that'll make our stay and their care for us during those particular moments and hospitals and nursing homes and other entities so much easier, and our transitions so much easier if we continue to educate and plan as we move through our lives. So we're going to take a short pause and come back with the conclusion of our program. Time passes by so fast. And we'll be right back with our guest, Miss Marilyn Baldwin, all the way from Orlando, Florida.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
Wow, I scored a touchdown when I found sports on NFB Newsline.
I enjoy reading TV guide listings on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind. We read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
Welcome back to the conclusion of our show. And Marilyn, we'd like to thank you for being our guest today. And do you have any departing words for our viewing and listening audience?
First of all, I want to thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to work with both of you. And I want to leave you with this quote from Helen Keller. Alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much.
Well, Marilyn, just thank you so much for sharing with us. And, you know, maybe next year we can have you come right back in with us and share some more great information with us. And we'll be looking forward to it. Thank you again for just being the person and the woman that you are. And it's great to be a colleague of yours. So we want to state to our viewing and listening audience, we try to bring you programs and shows that will educate and bring about opportunities for people that are blind and people with disabilities, and also our mainstream society. So we want to thank you once again. We want you to join us next week as we bring about a brand new show. So take good care, everyone. Take good care of each other and stay safe.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.